I'm 72 years old, and last winter, a doctor sat across from me and said the word cancer. At the end of this video, I'm sharing something I wish someone had told me years ago. It cost me time, pain, and experience to learn. Don't skip. This last message matters.
I remember thinking how strange it was that the room didn't tilt. I had always imagined news like that would knock me sideways, but it didn't. I just nodded. I folded my hands in my lap like a polite girl and nodded while something inside me went very still.
Before we move ahead, I want to tell you something important. Subscribe to the channel. The team behind this channel puts real effort into sharing real stories from real people to help improve your life.
At 72, you already know you don't have forever. You feel it in your knees when you climb the stairs. You feel it when the grocery bags seem heavier than they used to. But knowing you're mortal is different from having someone circle a date on the calendar of your life with a thick black pen. When I walked to my car after that appointment, the sky looked the same. Traffic moved. People hurried in and out of the pharmacy next door. I sat behind the steering wheel for a long time and thought, so this is how it ends. Not with drama, just a word in a small office. I didn't cry that day. That surprised me most. I have lived what most would call a good life. I raised 2 children. I was married for 46 years. I worked part-time at the library until my late 60s. I kept a tidy house. I sent birthday cards. I made pot roast on Sundays. From the outside, it looks whole. But cancer has a way of peeling the surface back. It makes you sit in the quiet and ask what you did with the hours. When I was in my 20s, I believed time was something that stretched endlessly ahead. I married at 23. He was steady and kind, not flashy. My mother liked him, and that mattered to me then more than I realized. We bought a small house with pale blue siding and a yard just big enough for a swing set. I remember standing in the empty living room the first night, our voices echoing and feeling so certain we were at the beginning of something important. I had dreams once, nothing dramatic. I wanted to travel, maybe take classes in art history. I loved paintings. I used to sit with books open on my lap and trace the shapes of distant cities with my finger, Florence, Paris, places that felt like they belonged to someone braver. But there was always something practical to do first. A baby on the way, a car that needed replacing, my husband working late for a promotion. I told myself I could go later when things settled down, when the children were older, when the mortgage was smaller. There was always a later, and I was good at being sensible, good at putting my own wants in a small box and sliding it onto a high shelf. In my 30s, life became a rhythm of packing lunches, folding laundry, waiting up for the sound of the garage door. I don't remember deciding to make myself smaller. It just happened in inches. There were moments, tiny ones, when I felt the edges of myself press against something. Once, a friend invited me on a weekend trip to the coast, just 2 days. I almost said yes. I could still feel the salt air from childhood summers, but my husband had an important meeting that Monday, and he said he'd be tired if he had to handle the kids alone all weekend. He didn't forbid me. He just looked disappointed. So I said no. I told my friend, maybe next time. There wasn't a next time. In my 40s, I went back to work at the library. I told everyone it was to help with college tuition, and that was true. But it was also because I wanted a place where my name was spoken without being followed by Mom or Honey. I loved the quiet of that building, the smell of paper, the way stories waited patiently on shelves. Sometimes I would run my hand along the spines and think about all the lives being lived inside those pages. So many choices. So many chances. I don't regret loving my family. That part is solid. What I regret is how often I chose efficiency over presence. I was always preparing the next thing, cleaning up before sitting down, thinking about tomorrow while today was still in front of me. My daughter once asked me to watch her practice a dance she'd learned. I was at the sink, my hands in soapy water. I said, "In a minute." She waited in the doorway, hopeful. I dried my hands slowly. I wiped the counter. I put the sponge away. By the time I came into the living room, she'd gone upstairs. She said it was okay. She'd show me later. I can't remember if she ever did. That's how it happens. Not in grand betrayals, just in small postponements, small decisions to finish one more task before turning towards someone you love. My husband worked hard. I admired him for that. But I also see now how we both hid inside our responsibilities. We talked about bills, about schedules, about what needed fixing. We didn't talk much about fear or longing or the quiet loneliness that can sit between two people in the same bed. There were evenings I wanted to reach across the space between us and say, "Are you happy? Is this enough for you?" But the television hummed, the news droned on, and it felt easier to let the question dissolve. When he retired at 65, I thought we would finally have that time we'd been saving, the trips, the long conversations over coffee, the unhurried mornings. But retirement didn't change us the way I expected. We were so practiced at being busy that stillness felt uncomfortable. He tinkered in the garage. I reorganized closets that didn't need organizing. We had the time. We just didn't know how to step into it. He died 3 years ago. A heart attack, sudden and cruel in its simplicity. One moment he was asking me where I'd put the screwdriver. The next, he was on the kitchen floor and the world had cracked open. I remember the ambulance lights flashing against the walls we'd painted together decades earlier. I remember thinking, this can't be it. We were supposed to have more. After the funeral, the house felt too large. Every chair held the shape of him. His slippers sat by the bed for weeks before I could move them. That was the first time I truly understood what delay costs. We had postponed tenderness for some day. We had assumed there would be another season to say the softer things. There wasn't. And now with this illness, I sit in the same kitchen alone. The clock ticks louder than it used to, or maybe I just hear it now. Cancer is a strange companion. It makes ordinary things shimmer with meaning, the way sunlight lands on the table, the sound of my granddaughter laughing on the phone. Even the weight of a blanket across my legs feels deliberate. At my first chemotherapy appointment, I looked around the room at other women, some younger than my own children, some older than me. We all wore the same thin gowns. No one's life story showed on the surface, just veins and fragile skin and quiet hope. I caught my reflection in a window one day after my hair began to thin. I hardly recognized myself. But what startled me wasn't the physical change. It was the realization that I had spent so many years trying to hold everything together, and in the end, my body would unravel anyway. I used to think regret would come from big mistakes, affairs, cruel words, dramatic failures. Mine comes from something softer. I regret the afternoons I hurried through, the conversations I cut short because dinner was burning, the times I chose being right over being kind. I regret how often I assumed love would wait patiently until I had more energy. My son lives in another state now. He calls every Sunday. We talk about his job, about the weather, about the rising cost of groceries. There are pauses in our conversations where something deeper hovers, but neither of us quite steps into it. I don't blame him. I taught him, without meaning to, that feelings could be set aside for later. When I told my children about the cancer, they both tried to be strong for me. I could hear the strain in their voices. My daughter cried in the bathroom so I wouldn't hear, but I did. I wanted to tell them I was sorry, not for being sick, for all the times I wasn't fully there. Illness strips you down to essentials. You start to see your life not as a list of accomplishments, but as a collection of moments. Who did you sit with? Who did you listen to? Who felt safe telling you the truth? I did many things well. I kept promises. I showed up. I was dependable. But I wonder now if I was brave enough to ask for more, brave enough to risk disappointing someone in order to honor my own quiet desires, brave enough to say, this matters to me. There's a difference between sacrifice and disappearance. I didn't understand that when I was young. The turning point for me wasn't the diagnosis itself. It was a Tuesday afternoon a few weeks later. I was sitting in my living room, too tired to move much. The house was silent except for the refrigerator humming. I looked around and realized that almost everything I'd worried about over the years was gone or irrelevant. The spotless baseboards, the perfectly folded towels, the opinions of neighbors. None of it could sit beside me in that chair. What remained were faces, my children as toddlers, sticky with jam, my husband's crooked smile, my own mother's hands, wrinkled and warm. I saw clearly, in a way that almost hurt, that life had never been about getting everything done. It had been about being there while it was happening, and I had been there, but not always fully. That's the quiet ache I carry now, not that I failed, just that I postponed. There are things I will never do.
We think life will give us a quieter season, a better time, a moment when things finally slow down and we can say what matters. But later is a promise no one signed. The tragedy isn't that life ends. It's that we keep postponing it while we're still here. We delay the hug, the difficult conversation, the trip, the honesty. We assume the people we love will still be waiting in the next room. Assume our bodies will cooperate with our plans. They won't always. So sit down now. Listen now. Love now. Because in the end, it's never about how efficiently you lived. It's about how present you were while it was happening. There is no later. There is only now.